Well, welcome everyone to this week's episode of System Override. We have some great topics to talk about. The news has been crazy with some new things, not just doom and gloom about AI this week. We are talking about hiring people, uh, jobs that are available and not being able to fill them, talking about um, employees that don't have resumes built in Canada or the US and how we're trying to celebrate and help them. But before we get started today, we want to introduce, we're so excited to have Ola Ifton with us. She is local here in Calgary with us, so we're super excited about that. But more importantly, she is exceptional at what she does. She's already written 5 books, of which I have one sitting right here on my desk. Uh, and in her day job, when she's not writing books, she's an executive strategist and business transformation. So, Ola, welcome to the show, and excited to have you with us. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into all of these amazing things that you're doing with your career?
Thank you, Shannon and Bree, for having me on this podcast. I'm so excited to be here. So, as you rightly said, I'm a business strategist and I have a very strong passion for business transformation. My background is in strategy and business transformation, of course. Been in Canada for over 20 years now, and currently I'm a managing partner at Balkan Inc., which is a consulting company that we just help to provide clarity, strategic direction, and execution. And I'm excited to be here. Like you rightly said, I'm an author as well. I've written 5 books, on my 6th book right now. Watch out for that. And yeah, excited to be here and to learn and share with you guys.
Where can people get your books?
Well, all my books are on Amazon. So just type my name. It will be my first name though. Ola is an abbreviated version of my first name.
Mhm.
My first name is Abimbola Ifedan. And so if you type Abimbola Ifedan, you would get my books, not Ola. But if you type Abimbola, which is Abim as in mother, Bola, Abimbola, and my last name, Ifedan, IF as in Florida, ID as in daughter, ON as in Oscar, you will get my name. So Ola is the last 3 letters of my full legal name.
Right. That's awesome. So I guess we're calling out to Amazon. We're giving them business on the podcast. We've been Facebook and Meta last time. So that's great. Everybody go on to Amazon and pick up her books. Okay, so Bree's with me too today. How's your week been, Bree?
You know what? It's been I say this every time. You know what, Shannon? It's been a busy week as my hair gets bigger and bigger. Um, it's been a really crazy week. No, it's been a good week. It's been a busy week. We're in our kind of post stampede, so there's lots of for those who
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know about the Calgary Stampede, it's a very busy time. It's also a very busy business time. We like to do our business and pleasure all in one together. So there's a lot of follow-ups. There's a lot of meetings, which is great. It's such a good opportunity to come across and meet people that you don't normally see. But it's been busy just trying to get all of that going. And, as a company, League's just got our app launched and a lot on the go. So we are always busy. We got a lot of
Yeah.
stuff.
Somebody said to me this morning, they're like, "Oh, so what's new?" And I'm like, "I'm running a tech
Everything.
company. What
Everything's
isn't
new
new?"
with me.
Every day is new. Every minute's new. Yeah. So, but we're excited. I've been looking forward to having Ola on the show for quite a number of months because I think we set this up quite a while ago. Ola has a very busy schedule, and catching her in Calgary is difficult to do. Okay, before we jump into the stories, though, we're going to reflect back on the big action from a couple of weeks. One of our traditions here on the podcast is that at the end of a show, we always give kind of an action out to our audience and then review it on the next show. So our action a couple of weeks ago was just like to celebrate something, and just it didn't matter whether it could be a career win, it could be something outside of your career, but I think people tend not to take enough time to celebrate, and it was in coordination with July 1st Canada Day,
Mm,
250th anniversary in the US, and thought it was a
yeah.
good thing. So, has there been anything in your life that you've celebrated recently, Ola?
Yes. Like I said, I just wrote my 5th book, which is just been published, and that's on the other side of the night.
Hmm.
And that's quite exciting for me. My son is finishing from U of A from engineering. So yay, graduation coming. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I studied computer engineering with a flair for software. So he's actually doing his internship with an AI consulting company. And of course, my first son is finished school. So I only have my baby at home right now. Well, I call him baby, but he's 16 now. So he
Yeah.
frowns at me when I say baby. But yeah, and most especially, Bria and Shannon, I'm very thankful for life. That's something that I celebrate on a consistent basis. And the ability to be able to impact my community. It's something I'm also very grateful for.
Aw, those are awesome things. Love U of A. That's also my alma mater. So I'm always happy when people graduate from U of A. Bree, what did you celebrate over the last couple weeks besides
You know
Stampede?
what? Yeah.
Besides
Too much
Stampede.
celebrating a stampede. I'm fatigued. Um, no, I think for me, like the biggest celebrations that I have are more like I love the little joys in life that are just
Hmm.
like the being and so like being present. And so for me, I've just been really leaning into that. You know, it's summer, the kids are home. And so like what that looks like for me is like I wake up with I have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old. So I wake up in bed with my 6-year-old because he woke up in the middle of the night and he finds his way into our room. And I love waking up with like little, little toad children in my bed and like all snuggled up and things like that. You know, I love the evening sitting with my husband on the porch and we're just out and it's beautiful and neighbors are coming by. And it's just, I don't know. I think for me, I have always had just very deep joy off of these little seemingly insignificant moments in life. And so when things are so busy, I just try to really reconnect back to that and just like, am I noticing? Am I being present? And just trying to like be
Hmm.
very present in the moment that I am because I run a very busy startup. And so it's very easy to forget and not notice, on your path from A to B to Z, all of these little things. And so that's been my celebrations have been a series of mini celebrations.
And that's
Hmm.
absolutely wonderful, Bray, because sometimes we don't recognize or we don't realize how important those things are until they actually become very important. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, or can't
and
exist
they're
anymore.
just memory.
Right.
Yeah, we're just memories. Like I look at my
Yeah.
boys right now, they're all grown up and I'm like, wow, I can cuddle them like I used to before anymore now because they're like, Mom. So when you can enjoy those moments and just little pleasures of life, I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
How about you, Shannon? What have you been celebrating?
Well, two things. I'm always very grateful um, of our heritage. So, as much as I joke about don't celebrate, like what separate the Stampede, it is a really meaningful time for me. I think that it's really interesting that we celebrate the roots of how we got here and the people that laid the land for us and gave us this amazing place to live and celebrate. And so, I think that that's a really unique festival, and I do find myself often, you do know it's like one of my favorite times, and everybody always think that's about the party, which of course I do love the celebratory style and the partying, but it's really about the fact that we can still reflect back hundreds of years now on something that's so important. And then the other thing is when you're running a tech company, I think the thing that you always have to remember is that you want to be where you are and where you want to be are never the same place. And so, not only reminding myself to celebrate where we are because we came from someplace like way further back,
Mm-hmm.
is just to make sure that other people know that as well and reflect on it and don't let that anxiety of I want to be somewhere that I'm not creep in too much. And I like celebrating as a group when we do those things too. Yeah.
That. I'm a repeat offender. I'm always looking ahead, and so I'm always charging. It's just like, yes, we did do that good thing. That was excellent. We need to lean into that more.
Yeah. I think it's natural. I think all of us are always like, when you get to the places in our careers that we are at, that is normal, right? We know we have to. We're trained now to be looking like, even when I was in my corporate world, I would say to my team, my job is to be six months ahead of you. My job is to be thinking where we're headed, not where we are today. Your job is to run today. And
Yeah.
and it is really important to be you can't all be at the same level, like at the same place, right? But there's four of us running these. So like we're always back and forth and back and forth. So No, it's really good. Like really good. And I think it's a really good exercise. Hopefully, similarly to what Ola said, is I hope that we always celebrate these little things. Like to celebrate is really important because it does remind us to be grateful of where we
Yeah.
are. And that's probably where we find the most joy. It's not necessarily in, the big things that happen. Those moments are memorable, but they aren't necessarily the thing that fills up your
Mhm.
happiness and keeps you really motivated on a day to day. Yeah.
I love
Okay,
it.
let's go to our first story. So, this is interesting. So, we're excited. Canadian employers, there was a story out this week that Canadian employers are again hiring. However, they just can't find the people to hire into the jobs. So, very interesting in a study that says that, Canadian hiring managers were feeling really positive about hiring in Q2 of 2026. But now they're saying they can't find the qualified people. And I've got lots of things to say about why they can't find them. But I'd love to hear what you have to say, Brie, on this one, and why we think there's a gap between the jobs availability and the people to take those jobs.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm very interested to understand, when it gets into like, do you have the right skills? Is it the right, how are we matching and how are we bringing people into these jobs? Because there is a huge amount of people right now in Canada looking for jobs. So I find it like absolutely astounding if that is the case. And we're having a hard time finding that because there is a ton of people here, a ton of very qualified people here. I would say both from like the Canadian education system and all the people who moved to Canada from incredible educational backgrounds. We have a very proficient, I would say, and highly qualified, group of people. So I find that very interesting in the sense of saying that that isn't the case. And before we hopped on the show, we started talking a little bit around even what it means to work in Canada and how that's different maybe than around the world. Obviously, everywhere has its own, way of doing business and its own way of operating that. And so that's kind of what came to mind to me is tying together some of those conversations because, we were chatting with Ola before this around like, as someone who has moved here, who's someone who came in, as a new to Canada, but also with a certain kind of background and experience, because we talked a lot around trust. Like trust, for better or worse, and as a blanket term, is kind of, a lot of what goes into these hiring decisions. But trust is different than like me trusting Shannon as my coworker. Trust is more just like what feels right. A lot of this is signals of what feels right beyond a resume based on the culture, based on subconscious signals that we don't even necessarily recognize. And
Mhm.
so Canada also is a very diverse place. There's a lot of people who've moved here, and we've certainly had a lot of that in the last few years. And so that's kind of where my brain goes to with this question is like, is it that we can't find them, or is it that we don't understand our own internal signaling system for what those signals feels right are, and we're not realizing how to bridge one, have awareness of that, and then two, bridge that into what could translate as also highly qualified skills, credentials, etc. The mismatch is happening in that way. But Ola, I would love to hear your thoughts on that because that's kind of where my brain went, and I know you had a lot of really interesting things to chat about this topic.
Yes, so there are two things there. I think the real issue here is what I call value matching failure. So, excuse me. So, while employers are saying they can't find trained people or skilled people, the question is, how are we even looking for those people, right?
Hmm.
That's the number one thing that employers need to really think about. And then on the employee side, which I'll talk about, is positioning. Okay, so how are they positioning to communicate that value to the potential employees? And then you mentioned something, Bree, about trust, and trust is an aftermath of that, which comes up when you've consistently demonstrated value. So the first one that I just want to kind of hone in on with the employers. So employers are, they're looking for people with skills, experience, and we know how those things are rapidly changing, especially now where we have AI and new skills just coming up, new terrain, new landscape of work coming up. And so most of the time, the way the employers design the hiring process is around those skill sets. And if we were to shift back a little bit and look at more what I call value-based hiring. So, for example, going beyond those skills. And the other problem, I think, that why they're not finding people to hire, which also comes to the employee side. The employee side is about positioning and also the remuneration. You want to hire people with good skills, but you want to pay 10 years ago.
Exactly.
So that's not going to work. So whilst you're saying you're not finding people, are you offering what I call a competitive wage rate for these people? So that's why I say there's a value mismatch in that. So the employers, you want to offer compensation based on yesterday's job market. That's not going to work. And you're looking for people that are skilled today. So my recommendation to employers is we've got to be realistic. We've got to know what skills we're, and sometimes employers, I find it interesting that some employers don't even know the exact skills they're looking for.
I think
So
that's very common.
I'll give you an example. I went some years back when I was actively practicing as a business analyst. I went to interview for a business analyst role. And this person on the other side interviewing me was interviewing me for what they thought was a business analyst role because it was a blanket thing. Now, as a business analyst and a trained business analyst, I happen to be the first certified in Alberta. I know a lot about the different personas or archetypes for business analysis, such as business process analyst, strategy analyst, systems analyst, business systems analyst. And these are all different archetypes with different skill set. Now, the job that we wanted to hire for was a BSA job, which is a business systems analyst job, which is a business analyst that specializes in a particular system, right? And they did not understand that from a generalist BA or a strategy BA. So they were asking me, so the skills they were looking for people with very strong coding background, programming background in that particular software, which I have a general idea about, but I'm not a SME in that area. So in that regard, they didn't even understand. And honestly, that interview turned into a learning process because I had to then educate them to say, this is not the skill, this is not the person you're looking for. The way you've crafted your the application and the job description does not match what you're looking for. So if I was desperate to get that job, I'll get that job. But I'm gonna struggle. They're gonna feel frustrated that, oh, we hired this person that's not delivering. So that's another issue, is that some employers don't even understand the core skills required for the job. And I want to suggest that instead of asking about what skills do we need, we should reverse engineer and ask, what problem do we want to solve? And what do we need to be able to solve that problem? Because, just because you need a business analyst, there's several business analyst types out there. You may end up getting the best BA, but for the wrong type of job, even as a business analyst. And like there's this saying that if you take a fish and want to make a fish to fly, the fish will feel inadequate. But it's not because it's inadequate, it's just in the wrong environment. If you put that fish in water, you'd see how that fish is going to swim so well. And the same with a bird. Put a bird in water, you're going to kill that bird, right? So that's another issue that I think that employers have, and that's why sometimes they can't get it feels like they can't get the right people. One is the compensation thing. Two is the lack of clarity in terms of the job description and what they're looking for. And I think and then of course the rapidly changing. You also want to make sure that you're hiring someone that has demonstrated a track record of continuous learning. Because you can't, nobody knows everything. But for me, I prefer adaptability. If you're able to adapt very quickly and learn, there's short courses out there. Something is coming up. There's AI going on right now. You can jump into that and do it without your employer or telling you to do that. That's a great skill that I would look for in someone I'm hiring. Now, on the employee side, especially for immigrants or people that have, of color that have immigrated to Canada, the way the resume is positioned is usually a laundry list of tasks that you've done, which is your yesterday. That's what you did yesterday. As an employer, you're looking for what you can do as opposed to what you've done. What you've done is a signal. So that value statement, a lot of people have a laundry list of what they've done, and there's no connection between what they've done and what the employer is looking for. So one of the greater questions I always ask when I go for interviews is, one, what is the problem we're trying to solve here? And then two, what does success look like for you? And then I marry the two together to see where my skill set can come. Because at the end of the day, as an employer, you're looking for someone to create value. So my skills, no matter how much skills that I have, if it cannot unlock value, there's no ROI. There's no ROI on that. So if I come and tell you I've had all these designations, which is great, I tell people qualification is not the same thing as certification. You can be qualified, but not certified. And you can be certified and not qualified. And what I mean by that is certification is more like you go to school, you get a certificate and all that. And these are things I have spoken about in my book, this book, Sell Me. It's all there. So it's Sell Me Strategies for Crafting Impactful Resume. You can be certified, have all the stuff. Like I tell people, I can train my 20-something-year-old kid to pass a PMP exam. He's certified, but he's not qualified because he's never had the experience to do that. And so a lot of people rush into that mistake of they're in a new country, they just want to get all these certifications. And one, it doesn't have any bearing with their qualifications. They've not done that. And so they get the foot in the door, but they cannot open that door completely. So that's another problem. And I illustrate that with, baking a cake. You can eat your cake, assuming it's well baked, without icing. But you cannot lick icing alone for too long. It tastes awful. But when you put the icing on the cake, you have a really lovely cake dessert. So the icing on the cake is the certification. The cake itself is the qualification. So you can still thrive in the market with a qualification, which is based on your experience, without necessarily having that certification. And that's where you build trust. Now, when you put the certification on top of it, then you have now become what I call a SME in that area. And that's why you find employers sometimes they will hire someone who has extensive experience but very minimal certification because the person has demonstrated trust and delivery and value over time. So for employees, I highly recommend that you move away from task-oriented resume to value positioning resume. And also be adaptable. Make sure that you're learning, you're consistently learning. And that's why I said the issue is not about they can't find, it's a value mismatch. They have a value mismatch, and that's what's going on. And so if we're able to close that gap, then we'll start to find the right. There are lots of well-trained. I mean, I schooled in Nigeria and partly in the States here. I went to Cornell and Queens and McMaster's in Canada, but my foundation was built in Africa from Nigeria. I schooled in Nigeria and and in Nigeria, I got hired to work with an American company, Accenture. So it's not like we don't have the skills. I think it's just a matter of value translation, value communication. And a lot of people struggle in that area. And that's one thing that this book would help you to articulate and craft impactful resume. I hope that addresses some of the issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I heard from that is, there's a lot of ambiguity and that, organizations really haven't clarified, for themselves, and it's being passed down to the individual level. And so at an individual level, what can you do? You need to get really clear on not just the past history, but how you're portraying yourself and how you're pulling that forward. And I think that actually, there's a bit of a gap there in the newcomer space, but I think even the next story supports some of continuing that conversation probably. If I'm looking at the
Wow,
rundown.
look at you and your transition today, Bree.
Well, it's a solid tee up for the next one.
It
So
is a solid tee up. And I think this is a great transition to we saw at Ottawa World Skills honored some companies that really have focused on this new to Canada or new to North America job market where they've really seen ways to celebrate new newcomers and their international experience and not downplay it. Because I have to tell you, it was a shock to me a few years ago. I learned that, particularly in Canada, often employees are, or even like as people are immigrating and, getting consultation on how to assimilate into Canada, that our employers will say to them they will not hire them without Canadian experience or Canadian education. And I just go, what? Like, I can't understand that. To your point, Ola, like, there's something about certification, but the experience of, communicating and collaborating and being curious and always learning, like, those things can happen around the world. Those are not things that are specific to Canada. And I've always found that the best teams, the most successful teams I've ever led are ones that have great diversity of thought. And that diversity can come in many, many ways, but always having people that didn't necessarily grow up in Canada was always really important and valuable to those teams, and the way that we communicated and thought and built ideas and came to conclusions on how we were going to proceed. So, Ola, since you have written a book about resumes, what do you think the single biggest thing that new immigrants do in their do in their resumes that is making it difficult for them to get hired, or to close that value gap? And what's the opportunity to unlock that the fastest for them?
So thanks, Shannon, for that. I think before I get into that question, I just want to pose a question to both you and Bree. I've heard a lot of Canadian experience. You need to have a Canadian experience. So my question is, what is the Canadian
Yeah.
experience?
It's a great question. That's sort of what I said back to when I found this out. Like, it was one of my employees at Neo said to me that she fell in love with a Canadian, uprooted her life, came from Europe. Like, we're not talking, like, she came from Germany. She had worked for Google, like Google in Ireland. She had worked for another big company in Germany, and everywhere she went, oh, sorry, you don't have any work experience in Canada. I'm like, so we want her to go to McDonald's. No offense to McDonald's, because it's a great place to work. My uncle made a great career out of everything he learned at McDonald's. He tells me that all the time. But like that. Okay, so now I've worked at McDonald's. Now do I have Canadian experience? I, I I don't know the answer to this question. Maybe Bree, you know the answer to what Canadian experience means to employers.
To be honest, I think this just goes back to what we were talking about as far as trust signal. Like, I don't think Canadian experience means anything other than someone took you on and they pre-vetted you so that I'm minimizing my
Ah,
risk. So I feel I have more trust because I know that someone else has taken you on. Sorry. Sucking too much air. But I
Sorry,
feel like
Bree.
this is where I see a lot of the breakdown in are you guys are freezing on the screen a little. Can you hear me okay still?
no. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Just want before I went on my whole little soapbox. I was like, am I recording or am I frozen? Um, But I think this is where
Yeah.
trust really comes in. And I also think, like, where I see a lot of breakdown with New to Canada and the stories that we hear from New to Canada is that, these people are coming in like with incredible qualifications. Like, they've got like this
Yeah.
and that and a PhD and like this one's a doctorate and blah, blah, blah. And, we're hearing how they can't. And I think, one, it's absolute bullshit. But two, I think it comes down to this weird thing of Canadians and this like long-standing deep need for this trust relationship, which is so ambiguous and nobody's even fully aware of what it means. It's just the signals that mean it's right. And so I think, someone's coming in with a different background, they've worked in a different industry, so like their industry counterpoints aren't the same. Take Calgary for example. We do a lot on energy or oil and gas, and so like people
Hmm.
are coming in with like vastly different career experience. I think people just don't know what to do with it because we are, we're beings that look for patterns, like sameness, understanding, familiarity. Like, those are all comfort things. And these are all things that make us feel good about our choices. You know what I mean? And so I think that's giant disconnect when someone is coming from another country. It's like, you even think of like a language from that perspective. It's like, think if you move to another country where there's another language. Say you move somewhere vastly different. You move to China where it's like a vastly different language. You've never really had the ability or the exposure to have like, it's not like, French to Spanish or something like where there's a little bit of, blending or ability to kind of like swim a little. And how well would you do in learning a new language, and then how well would you do in utilizing that language to its full extent of power in a business context? Like that would take some time. Now, you know what you've done in your own country here in Canada. Like that's what I always think is like I have, a long-standing tenure. I've been, in energy industry for like almost 20 years. Then I moved into tech. I've done a lot of shit. And so it's like you think about that and then imagine all of a sudden I'm somewhere new. I can't even really communicate that yet as effectively as I could if I was at home. And so all of these little signals, it's like this person might be incredible, but they also might be on the path to, really being able to communicate that well. And so I think that's where curiosity, oh, shout out to Tyler. There we go. Tyler Chisholm right there, dropping a curiosity.
There
had
you
him for
go.
coffee yesterday. I guess I've been incepted. I'm dropping it all in. But I do think there is something around, from a hiring perspective, just not being so process at all costs driven and like just kind of stuck above, the top kind of like, well, this is the marker, this is what I'm looking for, and not leaning in. Like you're missing out on a lot of opportunity by not getting to understand, or what kind of questions are you asking in your hiring process? Because are you really unearthing again, like what people are capable of, or are you just looking for, the superficial signals? And then if that's the case, then it's going to be a mismatch like we were talking about earlier. I just like it's a constant mismatch.
As you were saying all that, I was just like, you know what? We go back to this, like to call it a flaw, but I think one of the things that holds Canadians back and Canadian companies development, there's lots of discussion about this right now as we kind of reposition our value in the world is it's that risk tolerance that we are willing to take in Canada. It's so low. It's so
It's
low.
oh,
Um, yeah. There she is.
Okay.
Hola.
Yeah,
Can you hear
I
us?
don't know what happened there. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
yeah, we can
Yeah.
hear you. That's all good.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
it
all
just
good.
kicked me out.
Oh
It just
yeah,
kicked
no,
me
no,
out
no.
of this.
Oh
Well, we've been
no.
seeing Wi-Fi problems. It was funny earlier today. We were on a different call and like Bree just disappears.
Yeah, I
It's
just dropped.
like
Yeah, yeah.
it's like we're having
So Bree,
rotating brownouts of Wi-Fi in the city since we all live in a
yeah,
different quadrant of the city.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh,
So
we
I
were
think
just talking
Bree,
about trust.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say we were just talking about how the trust equation comes back into it. And, Shannon was saying, which I think we have a lot of feelings on just from like a business perspective, is like Canadians just like their risk tolerance is very low. And so it like escalates. I would say risk tolerance is very low. So then the trust bandwidth takes so long and we're so freaking slow to make decisions. It's so painful. And so I think a combination of all that trifecta is a part of that. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to ask that question because it's going to impact, the question about, the mystic and all the thing that we talked about earlier on. Because when you say you don't have a Canadian experience, what I hear from what we've discussed so far is, can I trust you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And and if that's the question, so we're going to look at it from two sides here. We're going to look at it from the employer side, which is, do you have that Canadian experience? Invariably, what you're saying is, can I really trust you to be able to deliver on this job? So the first thing is making sure that the employers have clarity in terms of what they're looking for. Because if you're trusting me to make coffee and I get in and I'm going to bake, there's a mismatch there because of expectation. So being very clear on the onset, what are you looking for and what does that look like? And I always like to encourage employers to what does success look like in this role?
Mm-hmm.
What are the KPIs that I need to be mindful of that I can say, okay, this person is delivering? So once that's clear and you can communicate that, that helps to start to lower that trust index, or maybe increase the trust index, depending on how you look at it. The second thing also is that, you can also test the waters, offer people some sort of internship experience. to kind of see whether that marriage would work, right?
Mhm.
So, have people do a 2 months or 3 months max and see
Mhm.
what they can bring to the table, with a caveat that if this is what you're looking for, then you can then transition them into a full pay, thing. So I think that also helps with that, because the Canadian experience, like I tell people, like you rightly said, if you've worked for, GM and all those top companies in the world,
Yeah.
so what's the Canadian experience then? Like, if
Yeah.
you
It doesn't
yeah, it
make
doesn't
sense to
really,
me.
it doesn't really hit it for me, because I'm like, what exact? That's why I asked the question, what is the Canadian experience? Because if I've worked at Mobil, I've worked at Shell, I've worked at, GM, I've worked at Mercedes Benz, I've worked at Arthur Anderson. These are big companies with international and complex operations. And you've been able to survive and thrive in those environments. What makes the Canadian environment distinctively different from those types of environment, other than the issue of, I'm not sure whether you can do this work, and so I'm a bit
Hmm.
hesitant? And it's okay, everybody's got their own culture, so you can manage that by offering what I call, a soft sort of landing for the potential employer who is now an intern, and also for the company as well, which is why in my foundation I have a program that it's called uh Launchpad.
Mhm.
Basically, trying to help new immigrants, match them with potential employers, and taking off that burden on, we don't have budget, so the foundation funds that, so that way you can test the marriage and see whether it works and what they can delete. So that's on that side, on the Canadian side. Now, the mistake that a lot of professionally trained come with is, one, they're not aware of the environment that they're in. So, and
Hmm.
they also don't know that they're competing against. So you're not just, so for example, I'll speak about Nigeria, which is my country of origin, although I'm a Canadian now, but you are appealing to a wider audience than the audience of your country. So there's certain phrases and terminologies that you might look at in your resume and it resonates with you, but your
Mhm.
Canadian employer is struggling to like figure out what that means, because
Yeah,
there's
that's
a
a good point.
mismatch of nomenclature, right?
Hmm.
And then there's some information you will have in your resume that for a Canadian employer, it's kind of like TMI, like having your date of birth, having where, having the country you're from, having like some of those things where it's probably required in certain places, which is why I try to differentiate with people. There's a difference between CV and resume,
Mhm.
very subtle difference. So there's some of those nomenclature breakdown that the Canadian employer is trying to figure out, what does this mean? And, and they don't understand that. And the other thing is, a lot of people are big on listing tasks that they've done rather than communicating value. And they're
Hmm.
also very on certifications, which is a good thing. I'm well certified and I don't downplay that. But you have to be strategic about your certification. Is your so for example, if I say I'm a business analyst and I'm taking all my certification in business analysis, but you as an employer, you look at my resume and all my work is in customer service, is in some sort of sales, and I'm doing some sort of, engineering, some like it's all over the place. And you're struggling to say, this person on paper does not, what I'm reading on paper, there's a misalignment with the certifications that they have and the experience that they, so this person feels and walks more of a solid customer service person, but their resume, their certification is positioning them as someone who has led transformation and all that stuff, and I don't see that experience in that resume. So that already breaks trust, because the employer is starting to think, is this cooked? Is this
Yeah.
resume, has it been manipulated, because it's not speaking? And that's why for very competitive jobs, you find out that I would say, these are the skills we're looking at. Point to where that skill was utilized in your resume.
Yeah.
Like if you go through like the government of Alberta jobs or whatever, they will not just look at your resume. They'll say, which section of your resume address this particular skills, or where have you utilized it? And so that is at least it starts to help to close that gap, rather than you just have those long release. And I have seen a couple resumes that I look at and I'm going, is this person an agile person? Are they a cybersecurity person? Or are
Mhm.
they a customer service person? Because it's all over the place. And I'm
Yeah.
going, they have all those things. And just because you can pass an exam doesn't mean that's the right exam for you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's on that one. So I think paid job readiness, internship, adaptability, having problem solving ability, and all those things will help the employers. And then once on the employee side, having that clear articulation and translating your task into value enabled, what you can enable is great. And then mapping that strategically with your skill set and the experience to back it up will start to help to close that trust gap. And then, um, I hope that by that, a lot more people will get their foot in the door and be able to land a job, because interview is one thing. Interview is a great sign that you're heading in the right direction. And so we'll talk about that maybe on another podcast on some of the things that you can do to be able to get that job, because you can have series of interviews, which is where it's like going on a date. It doesn't mean you end up dating
Yeah,
that person.
together. Yeah.
Right. You understand? So it's like, okay, I want to see what you're like. So interview is like your career date. And then if you do well there, then maybe you have a relationship. And a lot of people have a lot of interviews, but they're not well prepared for that. And so they don't land. So those are also some of the reasons why it looks like, oh, we're looking for the right people we can't find. There are multiple issues that result into that. And I
Yeah.
think lastly, like I mentioned before we started, I'll just throw this in. It's in my podcast, but every new immigrant or potential someone looking for work should learn to pivot. And what I mean by that, pivot is an acronym that I developed and I spoke about in one of my podcast reset talks. P stands for positioning success anew. So what that means is that in your new environment, what does success look like for you as an employer and for you as an employee? And then the I stands for invest in yourself, which is where you start to talk about adaptability, because the world is changing. What got you there yesterday will not get you there tomorrow. So for example, I started off as an economist and then I pivoted into IT, and now I'm focusing on strategy. And with the strategy world, things is changing with AI and all that. Now I'm training myself, I'm developing myself. So if you're not investing in yourself, there's nothing as career security, it's career resilience.
Yeah.
So you've got to be resilient. There's no longer career security because you just need one earnings call and there goes your job. Right?
That's
So,
true.
but if you're career resilient, you can continue to recalibrate or reinvent yourself, which is one of the things I wrote in my other book, Recalibrate, Taking Your Life Back After a Setback. So you lose your job, what happens? It's not career security. It now becomes career resilience. How resilient are you to bounce back and keep moving? And then when you talk about the V, value your skills. Now, before you can value your skills, you need to know what those skills are. And so a lot of people don't even, if I say, what are your top 3, 4 skills? They're going to ramble through and all that. For example, I ask people, okay, you're a business analyst, what do you do? And they start telling me I write requirements, I do this, I do processes. That's what you do. And if I'm not interested in those tasks, you just shut yourself off, right? So in the book that Shannon referenced, which is The Business of Business Analysis, where I talked about what does it really mean, is if you're describing tasks to an executive, you lose them, because if those tasks are not in their laundry list of what they are thinking about, there's a disconnect. So you must have a way to articulate that value in a way that is universally appealing. So I tell people, so if you say you're a business analyst, instead of telling me you write requirements, you do functional design, systems, this and all that, what about we say something, I help facilitate solutions that deliver value to the organization. That is a fantastic way to describe business analysis, because you as a recruiter or as an employer, you're like, wow. So you can help facilitate solution. Now with that comes the question, what's the problem? So it encompasses everything, whether it's requirements, whether it's design. Like, I have not limited or boxed myself into a particular set of tasks, which is another mistake that immigrants make, is, oh, I do agile, I do waterfall. What if you're in an environment that you don't do both? You already shut yourself out, because they're like, oh, she's not just an agile person. But this requires a combination of agile and waterfall and some maybe other delivery methodology that you may well be qualified for, but you have communicated wrongly. So that's that as well. So that's the value, the V. And then the O is outline your plans. have a plan, be very strategic. So when I say pivot, I'm not saying leave your work today, but you have to have a strategic plan. So what are some things that you're doing right now? Maybe like taking on a stretch assignment, upskilling yourself, reskilling yourself. Just, you don't, if for you to have a successful career and to thrive and to have career resilience, it doesn't happen by chance. It happens by design. And I need people to understand that. So when I had a career, I had in 2024, I had a situation with my job and I had to leave. And I could sit down there. There was an earnings call. There was a cybersecurity incident. A lot of people were laid off at that time from a particular company in Calgary. And you could sit down there and cry over spilled milk and go, what happened? But after that, and that was what led me to writing that book, Recalibrate. I went back and I learned. I went back to school. I got my I went back to my master's. I got my certificate, my director's college degree there. I started investing in myself. I started reading about AI. I started doing so many things. Voila, I was already positioned. I tell people success happens when opportunity meets preparation. A lot of people are looking for success, but they're not ready to invest and be prepared.
Mhm.
And so once I did that, I'd rebranded myself. And then it wasn't long after that I got this call to start working on this project. Whereas I could have sat down there and be like, oh no, what happened? I spent this many years with this company, blah, 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 blah. But I went ahead and I reinvented myself. And then the last letter in the pivot framework is take the lead. So just don't do this. Stretch yourself a little bit. Take that stretch assignment, volunteer in that organization, reach out to that person, schedule that coffee meeting. You just don't sit down and expect that, the executives are busy trying to solve some other problems. So you have to own your career. Like, for example, as a personal story, I have people that I really like look up to. They're my mentors, and I make sure, and they're mostly CEOs in the C-suite, and I schedule quarterly meetings with them every year. I go
Mhm.
for coffee, I go for lunch, right? Just to kind of hear their perspective. And I think lastly also, you also need to know what you offer. Like, Bray and Shannon, I don't think you want to hire someone that comes to you and say, please just hire me for this job. I need this job badly. Someone that's desperate. But if I come to you and when you know this, when you have this identity, it exudes a confidence that you can explain, right? And that is it. A lot of people can't even articulate what are their top skills, what is the value they bring to the table. And because they can't do that, it's a struggle. And if you're approaching your career as a plea rather than, positioning yourself as a value that I'm bringing, this is what I'm going to enable you to do. They're two different things. And nobody's going to hire you just because you have those skills or you have all those certifications, which is great. At best, they'll go for coffee meetings with you. But during that coffee meeting and interaction, they're already forming their opinion, right, about you, whether you are able to deliver or not, based on the skill set that you can articulate. So I think those are some of the mistakes that professionals, internationally trained professionals experience, and also some of the issues that local employees also face. I hope that really helps.
Yeah, as we've talked through both of these kind of big topics around careers, um, the more and more we talk about them, I hear it's tough. Like, you have to put effort and work into your career. It's not something that just comes like
No,
abracadabra magic. You
no.
you need to work on it all the time, which is part of what spearheaded us to start League, right? Is that career management should be a little bit every day, so that you're keeping on top of what you're working on, what's working, what's not working, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, those sort of things. And that ultimately, um, I think Canadians can do a better job on increasing their risk and trusting that whether you got your experience surrounded in the borders of Canada or whether you got the experience somewhere else, that person's probably going to do a great job for you. But in total, like, everybody has to figure out how to bridge that gap, that value gap of how what they've done in their past helps in what they want to be doing in their future, and they have to tell that story. The employee has to be able to articulate that story. They cannot expect that whoever's interviewing them is going to decipher what they're saying and make it align to what they're looking for. And so, I think everything we've talked about today has been about hard work, and that careers don't just come naturally.
Oh.
Which is why I'm going to transition to the big ask now, because and that's what we talk about this week is like, what is that one thing that you actually do to get a hard task done? Because all of us could sit on the couch and not do hard tasks. We could choose that. We probably wouldn't be on this podcast though. So Bree, like, how do you get yourself motivated? Like, you're a CEO of this company. It is not easy, right? And so, like, what makes you get out of bed and do those hard tasks every day? What do you do?
You know what? I find for um me, it's about momentum. Like it's about like even when you don't feel like it's just like putting yourself in the process of what's that next step? What's that next step? Like just getting moving is what gets things going. Now, also
Mm,
weirdly, Taylor Swift for some reason, like is not even like when I put on Taylor Swift for some reason, I'm highly productive, but old school Taylor, not like new Taylor. But there's something about old school kind of country-ish Taylor where I'm like, let's clean the house. I gotta get all this stuff done. So there's like, I think it's like find those things that like amp you up and like do it intentionally. Like for me, like I need to have, some time in the morning to ruminate a little bit in my brain and then things combobulate. So now I've intentionally made space in my day so I can have that in the morning. If I feel like I'm rushing from thing to thing to thing, I kind of like you get into that, like, you're unclear, you're muddy, and then
that's a
next thing you
great tip.
know, it's 4 p.m. and you're just like, "What the fuck did I get done
Yeah.
today?" Like, and so, like, I think that's for me. I need to have some rumination time. Everything kind of locks into my place. And then what are the things that get me going? Like, like, if it's physical movement, like, then do that. You know what I mean? For me, if it's listening to a little Taylor and having this, like, little zhuzh time, sometimes I do a little hop around because sometimes it's just like, you got to get yourself in the
Move
new
your body. Yeah.
headspace. Um, and then the biggest thing though is like just knowing like that doesn't work 100% of the time. So the best thing you can do for yourself is it's just like just start moving towards it. If it's like it's opening the task, it's starting to do the whatever, it's making the phone call. I just force myself to do stuff even when I don't want to do it, and I'll say it out loud. If I'm feeling like for the really big scary things in my life that I have been unsure of or worried about doing, I say it out loud. I make it a proclamation to people in my life. Maybe I'll even put it on social media. You know what I mean? On my like social account and just be like, cause then I feel like I have a level of visibility and accountability. This can't hide as like my dirty little secret that nobody will know if I don't do it. I've put it in the world now, and now I have accountability. If I'm not going to be good enough for accountability to myself, well, now I'm going to put myself on a stage. So my whole thing is like making myself uncomfortable, I guess, and then not leaning into it, like making myself feel uncomfortable and just understanding it is okay. Like, I think as creatures, we chase comfort way too much. Like, we think that comfort equals good. Comfort is just comfort. That's all it is. It's neither good nor bad, but just because something's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad or something to be avoided,
Avoided.
because
Yeah.
my things that I've been most proud of in life came from periods of great extreme discomfort.
Hmm. That's
So
great.
that's my
Ola, how about you? What's the one thing you do to get yourself motivated to do hard stuff?
Yeah, and I love that thing that Bray talked about in terms of putting affirmations and making herself publicly creating that public accountability. I do that as well. I put that on my Instagram. I do the affirmation. So that way I kind of like, okay, I'm held to that standard. So for me, as I've mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of value, whatever activity, whatever task that I'm working on. So I think about who's going to benefit when I complete it and what value would it create. And that those questions motivate me because it helps me to connect purpose to impact and to the people that will and the outcome will serve.
Yeah.
So and also it helps me to move from analysis to action and from action to value. And so if I'm not able to see, and that's why maybe because I also have a strong performance management background, I'm very big on KPIs. So I'm always asking, even when I teach my students, because I also teach as well at the university here. One of the things I keep asking is, so what? So if I complete this, what happens? Like what value am I unlocking? What impact am I making? And so if I have that clarity, that is the motivation for me that yes, I'm doing something that's worth the while, because I also want to run away from what's called analysis paralysis. Because if you're just doing all those things, and I always use this example with my students, like you can run a 5K in your basement on your treadmill, and you can go outside on a good weather and run the same 5K. Both of you have done 5K. Both of you have probably expended the same type of energy, but one is moved and the other is static. So there's movement and there is one that is motion.
Mm,
So what I tell people is I try to run away from motion. I want to move. And so knowing that I'm moving, I'm making that impact. I know the outcome is affecting, and I'm expending the same energy as somebody else who is probably doing similar stuff, but they're just in emotion.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that really energizes me and keeps me going. So I always encourage people, stop the motion and get on the
yeah,
movement. So when the task is hard, what I tell people is reconnect to the value, and that keeps you moving.
that
I
does.
like that.
That's
What do
great.
you do,
That's really
Shannon?
good.
How do you get going?
Yeah, one of the things I really a practice I learned a while ago is like when I think of something that needs to be done, particularly when it's something I don't want to do or I think it's hard, I just go do it right then in the moment,
Mm,
as opposed to putting it on a list or, thinking about it too much. I just go do it. And sometimes it doesn't work out that it gets done right then because
mm-hmm,
maybe I wasn't as prepared as I wanted to, but at least I did that a little bit forward. It wasn't about sitting still. I think in all three of us, it's always a little bit about just trajectory forward. It doesn't
mm-hmm,
need to be miles. It could be a little bit at a time, but it starts to lessen the apprehension around it being that much harder than that, really, really hard because you're breaking it out. And so that's just always been a mindset of mine, including it makes sure that we get the dishes done at night and stuff like that. It's not
So
always
that's probably
it's
what you
always the
call
super hard
doing
things,
it
but
afraid, doing it afraid, which
yeah,
which of course it's a great thing because a lot of people want to wait for that perfect timing, and there's,
yeah,
to Bree's
mm-hmm,
point, comfort doesn't give you anything. As a matter of fact,
no,
in some interviews, they've built in like that failure index where they ask you where you failed. And that's
yes,
great because they want to make sure that you have the ability to absorb failure and build that resilience. So like I tell people, if you've never failed in your life, in your career or whatever, you're probably not as good as you think you are because you just need one thing to break you, and then let's see how you're going to react there. And if you're able to still bounce back, then for sure you are what you say you are. So comfort isn't a very good I wouldn't say comfort is great, but it's not a good trigger for you to reinvent yourself. You've got to step out of your comfort zone, and I like that
exactly.
phrase. Got to do it afraid.
yeah, you
Yeah,
do.
that's
Comfort's for
awesome.
movies. Comfort's for
Yeah,
snuggling in with some popcorn and a blanket. Comfort is not for propelling your career forward.
no,
No,
it
no, you got to
definitely is
take
not.
those risks, but like I tell people, make sure you're taking strategic and calculated risk. Okay.
Yeah,
Otherwise that could be more,
that's right.
yeah,
Don't want it to be reckless. Nobody's no,
no,
especially with
no,
our careers. Our careers are
you don't want
too,
to be reckless. That
yeah,
could be more discouraging if you were to just do that. And honestly, and also I tell people, be yourself. We all have different skill set. We're all uniquely gifted. So just be yourself and sit down and look at what comes to you naturally, effortlessly.
Mm-hmm.
That is probably your top skills, right? And don't try to be someone else. Just do that and thrive in that and
exactly.
get all your certification and all your training and all that in that area and sell that big time. But don't say because something is selling or this person is making this money, you don't know what's going on there. You jump into that. It's like seeing people swimming and you don't know the person is Michael Phelps, and you jump into the water and you're like, oh, he's swimming so well, I think I'm gonna make more money. You're just gonna die because he's a trained athlete. You're not. So
Exactly.
don't try to be someone else. Be yourself, and we're all uniquely gifted.
Yeah. Okay, ladies, we are out of time. What a great conversation. Thank you, Ola, for joining us. Bree, as
Thank
always, it was a pleasure, and we'll talk to everybody again next week. Thank
thank you
Yes,
you.
it
so
was
much.
great having you,
Pleasure
Ola.
having me. Bye for now.